The millionaire protected his contract bride in silence. Asking for nothing in return, Clara felt it before she understood it. The room was full. Laughter moved easily between people dressed in quiet luxury. Glasses clinked. Voices overlapped. Everything appeared polite, controlled, harmless. And yet, something in her chest tightened. A man stood too close. Not touching, not speaking loudly, just close enough that his presence pressed against the edges of her comfort. He smiled as if they shared a secret. "You must enjoy this life," he said softly. "Being protected like this." Clara did not respond. Across the room, Ethan noticed the shift immediately. He did not move toward her. He did not interrupt. He did not draw attention to himself. He simply watched and made a decision no one else would ever hear about. The question was not whether he would protect her. The question was whether protection could exist without being claimed. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The contract marriage had made Clara visible in ways she was not prepared for. Before, she had learned how to disappear, how to move quietly through rooms without leaving an impression. Now people noticed her, not because of who she was, but because of who she stood beside. Ethan never commented on it. He understood attention. He understood how quickly it could turn sharp. That evening, the gathering unfolded like dozens he had attended before. Business partners, social acquaintances, conversations layered with implication rather than meaning. Clara stood near the window, her posture composed, her hands loosely folded. From a distance, she looked calm. Ethan saw the details others missed. The way her shoulders rose slightly when someone stepped closer. The way her gaze shifted toward the door, measuring space without realizing she was doing it. He did not approach her. Instead, he excused himself quietly and stepped into a side corridor. His phone was already in his hand. He spoke in a low voice, his words precise and unremarkable to anyone who might overhear. "Yes," he said, "that conversation ends tonight." A pause. "No, I do not need an explanation." He ended the call and returned to the room as if nothing had happened. Moments later, the man standing too close to Clara was called away. Apologies were exchanged. Smiles faded into something more cautious. Clara felt the pressure ease without understanding why. She exhaled slowly. Ethan remained where he was, across the room, his expression unchanged. Later, as the gathering thinned, Clara stepped outside onto the terrace alone. The cool air steadied her breathing. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Ethan stopped several feet away. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes." He accepted the answer without probing further. "If you'd like to leave," he said, "we can." She considered that, then shook her head. "Not yet," she replied. Ethan nodded once. "As you wish." He did not ask what had happened. He did not tell her what he had done. Clara watched him return inside, a strange awareness settling in her chest. Something had shifted. She did not know how. She did not know when. But for the first time that evening, she felt the room loosen its grip on her. And somewhere beneath that relief, a question began to form. If protection could exist without being announced, what else might be happening that she could not see? Clara did not mention the incident on the terrace. She returned inside with the others, her expression composed, her movements steady. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed how her breathing had slowed, how the tightness in her shoulders had eased. But no one was watching that closely. No one except Ethan. He did not approach her again that evening. He did not ask if she was comfortable or offer to leave early. He allowed the night to end on her terms, without drawing attention to the shift that had already occurred. When they returned home, the house welcomed them with quiet familiarity. The lights were low. The air was still. Clara removed her coat and hung it by the door. She paused there for a moment, her hand resting against the wall, grounding herself. Ethan watched from a distance. "You could take the guest room tonight if you prefer," he said evenly. She turned to him, surprised. "No," she replied after a moment. This is fine. He nodded, accepting the answer without interpretation. They moved through the house separately, each aware of the other's presence without needing to fill the space between them. Later, Clara sat alone in her room, replaying the evening in fragments. The man's voice, the way the room had seemed to close in, and then, just as suddenly, the pressure had lifted. She frowned. It had not felt like coincidence. She considered the possibility, then dismissed it. Ethan had not spoken to her. He had not intervened publicly. There had been no confrontation. And yet, the moment had passed as if someone had quietly removed an obstacle she had not known how to name. The next morning, Clara noticed it again. She stepped into the kitchen and paused, scanning the room out of habit. Nothing felt altered. The table was clear. The coffee machine hummed softly. Ethan stood by the counter, reading something on his tablet. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. He did not ask about the night before. She poured herself coffee and sat down. The silence between them felt neutral, not charged. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and froze. A message from a number she did not recognize. "I hope you are settling in well. Perhaps we could speak sometime." Privately. Her chest tightened. She did not respond. Across the room, Ethan noticed the change in her posture. The way her shoulders drew in. The way her gaze fixed on the screen. He did not ask what it was. He stood and moved toward the window instead, his voice calm. "I will be stepping out later today," he said. "If anyone contacts you that makes you uncomfortable, you do not need to respond." Clara looked up sharply. He was not looking at her. "How did you know?" she asked. Ethan turned slowly. "I did not," he said. "I was guessing." The answer unsettled her more than if he had admitted certainty. She hesitated, then held up her phone. "This," she said. Ethan glanced at the message, his expression unchanged. "Do you want it handled?" he asked. The question was precise. Not, "Do you want me to take care of it?" Not, "Should I say something?" Handled. Or not. Clara felt the weight of the choice settle in her chest. "Yes," she said quietly, "but I do not want to be involved." Ethan nodded. "Then you will not be," he replied. He did not ask her who the message was from. He did not ask why it unsettled her. He took a single step back, giving her space. By the afternoon, the message was gone. No follow-up. No explanation. The number did not contact her again. Clara noticed the absence before she noticed the relief. She sat on the sofa, her phone resting untouched beside her, and realized her hands were no longer shaking. That evening, she found Ethan in the study. "You did something," she said. He looked up. "Yes," he replied. "For me," she added. He closed the file in front of him slowly. "I removed a problem," he said. "That is all." She studied him, searching for something beneath the words. "You did not tell me," she said. "That was intentional," Ethan replied. "Why?" He met her gaze, his expression steady. "Because protection should not cost you your independence," he said. "And gratitude can become a burden." The words settled heavily between them. Clara felt something loosen inside her. For the first time, she understood what it felt different. She had been protected, not claimed, not reminded, not asked to repay the act in any form. And that quiet distinction changed everything. Clara did not sleep deeply that night. Not because she was anxious, but because her body was adjusting to something unfamiliar. Safety. She lay awake, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house, noticing how her breathing slowed without effort. There was no need to stay alert, no need to anticipate footsteps or voices. When morning came, it arrived gently. She stepped into the kitchen and found Ethan already there, his back turned as he prepared coffee. He did not look over his shoulder immediately. He finished what he was doing before acknowledging her presence. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. There was no reference to the message, no mention of what had been removed from her path. The absence of explanation felt deliberate. Clara sat at the table and watched the steam rise from her cup. She waited for the familiar impulse to thank him, to acknowledge what he had done so she could close the loop and move on. The impulse did not come. Instead, something else surfaced. Curiosity. She began to notice the pattern in his behavior more clearly. Now, Ethan did not hover. He did not check in repeatedly or offer reassurance disguised as concern. He went about his day as usual, moving through the house with quiet awareness, adjusting his presence without ever making it the center of attention. When Clara left the room, he did not track her movement. When she returned, he did not ask where she had been. The protection existed without a spotlight. That afternoon, Clara sat in the living room with her laptop open, attempting to focus on a task she had postponed for weeks. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain. She felt him before she heard him. Ethan paused in the doorway, took in the scene, then stepped back. "I will be in the study," he said. "If you need the space, let me know." He left before she could respond. The offer lingered, not the space itself, but the permission embedded within it. She exhaled and began to type. Minutes passed, then more. The words came slowly at first, then with greater ease. She adjusted her posture, settling into the work without the familiar tension in her shoulders. At one point, she realized something quietly astonishing. She was focused. Later, she stepped into the hallway to stretch and found Ethan exiting the study at the same time. They stopped several feet apart, neither intruding into the other's space. "I finished what I was working on," she said, surprising herself. Ethan nodded. "I am glad." She waited for a question that did not come. "I did not feel watched," she added. His expression remained neutral. "That was the intention," he said. Clara considered that. In the past, help had always come with visibility, with reminders, with expectations she was expected to anticipate and fulfill. This was different. That evening, she noticed a small change. A call came in on her phone from an unfamiliar number. Her pulse quickened reflexively, then steadied. She did not answer. The call did not repeat. She glanced toward the study, where Ethan sat working. He did not move. He did not look up. Whatever barrier had been placed remained in effect. Later, Clara joined him at the dining table. She did not sit across from him, but beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence without being enclosed by it. "Does it ever bother you?" she asked quietly. "What?" Ethan replied. "That. You do things without being acknowledged," she said. "Without being thanked." He considered her question carefully. "No," he said, "because acknowledgement can change the nature of the act." "How?" she asked. "It turns care into a transaction," he replied. "And I'm not interested in that." The words landed softly, but their impact was immediate. Clara felt something shift inside her. She was not being protected to create dependence. She was being protected so she could remain herself. That night, as she prepared for bed, Clara paused in front of the mirror. She studied her reflection, noticing how her expression had changed. She looked less guarded, less prepared to vanish. Across the hall, Ethan turned off the lights in the study and stood for a moment in the dark, reflecting on the line he continued to walk. Protection without possession. Care without claim. It was not easy, but it was necessary. And as the house settled into silence once more, both of them understood that something important was taking root. Not gratitude, not obligation, but trust. The change did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way the body releases tension before the mind understands why. Clara noticed it while doing something ordinary. She was standing in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when she realized her shoulders were not drawn up toward her ears. Her jaw was unclenched. Her breathing moved easily, without interruption. She froze, surprised by her own stillness. Nothing had happened, and that, she realized, was the point. Ethan sat at the table behind her, reviewing documents. The soft rustle of pages turned at an even pace. He was present without being intrusive, existing in the same space without demanding acknowledgement. Clara dried her hands and leaned against the counter. In the past, moments like this had been dangerous. Silence had meant anticipation. Calm had been temporary, something to enjoy cautiously before the next disruption. This calm did not feel fragile. She left the kitchen and moved through the house, opening a window, letting in fresh air. The sound of the city drifted up, distant and unthreatening. Ethan noticed the open window later. He closed the study door instead, adjusting his space to hers. That afternoon, Clara went out alone. She walked without urgency, allowing herself to linger in places she would once have avoided. A bookstore, a small park, a bench where she sat and watched. People pass. She did not feel exposed. She felt grounded. When she returned home, she carried groceries in her arms. Ethan stood as she entered and took one of the bags without comment, leaving her with enough to feel useful rather than relieved. "Thank you," she said reflexively. He paused, then nodded once. Of course. He did not say anything else. They put the groceries away together, moving around each other without friction. When she reached for the same shelf he was using, he stepped back immediately, giving her space before she had to ask. The gesture stayed with her. That evening, Clara found herself sitting on the sofa with her legs tucked beneath her, something she rarely did when others were present. The posture required trust. It left her unguarded. She realized what she was doing halfway through the motion and almost stopped herself. Then she continued. Ethan noticed and deliberately did not look at her. Later, she spoke without planning to. "I used to think safety was something you earned," she said quietly. Ethan did not interrupt. "Or something you lost if you were not careful enough," she continued. "I did not know it could be maintained." He turned toward her slowly. "It requires consistency," he said, "not effort." She considered that. Consistency meant predictability. Predictability meant the nervous system could rest. No surprises. No hidden costs. That night, Clara slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Her dreams were unremarkable. No sudden awakenings. No half-conscious scanning of the dark. In the morning, she woke with the faint sensation that something inside her had shifted position, settling into a more natural alignment. She found Ethan in the kitchen again. "I slept," she said. He looked up. "I am glad." There was no pride in his voice. No sense of accomplishment. Just acknowledgement. As the day unfolded, Clara realized that healing was not dramatic. It did not arrive with clarity or declarations. It arrived as capacity. The capacity to focus. The capacity to rest. The capacity to exist in a shared space without shrinking. Ethan felt the shift as well. He noticed the way she moved more freely through the house. The way she spoke without hesitation. The way she lingered instead of retreating. He did nothing to mark the change. He understood that naming it might disrupt it. That evening, as the lights dimmed and the house settled into quiet, Clara stood in the doorway of the study. "I feel different," she said. Ethan closed the folder in front of him and waited. "Not because anything happened," she added, "but because nothing did." He nodded. "That is usually how safety works," he replied. She smiled faintly. For the first time, healing did not feel like something she was chasing. It felt like something she was already inside. And as the night deepened, both of them understood that this was no longer about protection alone. It was about whether this safety, once felt, would be enough for Clara to choose what came next. The reminder arrived the next morning, not as conflict, but as fact. A thin envelope lay on the counter, addressed neatly, its edges crisp. Clara recognized the paper immediately. Legal, neutral, unemotional. She did not open it. She did not need to. The contract had never been far from her thoughts. It had simply faded into the background as her body learned what safety felt like again. Now it returned, not as a threat, but as a boundary with an expiration date. Ethan noticed the envelope as well. He did not reach for it. He poured coffee, set 2 cups on the table, and sat down across from her. He waited until she joined him. "I can have that handled later," he said calmly. She shook her head. "No, it is fine." She picked up the envelope and turned it over once, as if weighing its presence rather than its contents. "I just forgot how it feels," she admitted, "to have something pending." Ethan listened. "The quiet made me forget," she continued. "Not in a bad way, just enough to feel normal." "That is understandable," he said. "The contract was never meant to define your days." She met his eyes. "But it still exists." "Yes." The word landed cleanly between them. There was no argument. No reassurance layered with obligation. Just truth. Clara opened the envelope then, skimming the pages. Dates. Clauses. Neutral language that described her life as a temporary arrangement. She felt her chest tighten, but not with panic. With awareness. She folded the papers carefully and set them aside. "I do not feel trapped by this," she said after a moment. That is new. Ethan nodded. That is important. They spent the rest of the morning apart. Not distant, but separate. Clara needed the space to think without being watched, without interpreting kindness as persuasion. She walked again, sat again, let the city move around her. Her thoughts returned to the same question, again and again. What did she want if nothing was being taken from her? In the past, choices have been shaped by urgency. Leave before things worsen. Stay because there was nowhere else to go. This choice felt different. When she returned, Ethan was in the living room, reading. He looked up briefly and then back down, offering acknowledgement without interrogation. She sat across from him. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why have you never pushed? She asked. Not once. He closed the book. Because pressure creates compliance, he said. Not consent. She absorbed that. And compliance looks like peace, he continued. But it is not the same thing. Clara exhaled slowly. That would have been easier, she admitted, if you had asked for something. I know. The admission surprised her. But easier is not safer, he added. They sat in silence after that. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of shared understanding. Later that evening, Clara found herself in front of the calendar. The contract in date stared back at her, quiet and firm. She did not feel dread. She felt curiosity. What would it mean to choose rather than escape? She turned to Ethan. When the contract ends, she said, what happens? He did not answer immediately. That will be entirely up to you, he said at last. Nothing changes unless you decide it does. No expectation followed the statement. No hidden clause. Just room. Clara nodded, a subtle movement, but decisive in its own way. For the first time, the future did not feel like a narrowing path. It felt open, and as the night settled around them, both understood that the quiet protection Ethan had offered was no longer the center of the story. The center was now Clara's growing capacity to choose. What remained was not whether the contract would end, but what she would do with the freedom it promised. The first ripple did not come from Ethan. It came from outside. A message appeared on Clara's phone late that afternoon. Short, formal, polite in a way that carried weight. A reminder of an upcoming social obligation tied to the marriage. A holiday appearance. One evening. No expectations, but attendance appreciated. Clara stared at the screen longer than necessary. Her body reacted before her mind did. Shoulders tightening. Breath shifting shallow. She did not respond. She placed the phone face down on the table and stood, walking to the window. The city lights were already softening into evening, but the sense of pressure felt sharp. Ethan noticed the change immediately. He did not ask what it was. He asked, do you want to talk about it? The question itself was a choice. Clara turned to him. Something from the agreement, she said. Not urgent. Just there. He nodded once. Do you want help? The phrasing mattered. Not should. Not must. Help. She considered. I want to understand it first. Then I will stay out of it until you ask me in. Her chest loosened slightly. Later, she sat alone with the message, reading it again. It was reasonable, courteous, the kind of request people made when they assumed compliance as a given. She realized something then. Healing did not erase pressure. It changed how she met it. In the past, she would have agreed immediately, afraid that hesitation meant loss. Now she paused. That pause was new. When Ethan returned from call, she spoke. I'm not sure I want to go, she said. And that scares me. Why? Because saying no feels louder than saying yes. He considered that. Louder does not mean wrong. She smiled faintly. You are very good at not pushing. It is a skill learned the hard way. She did not ask how. That evening, they shared dinner quietly. Not avoidance, but grounding. Ethan spoke about neutral things. Clara listened, grateful for the normalcy. Afterward, she returned to the message and typed a response. She erased it, typed again. This time, she wrote with clarity. She would attend only if there were no expectations placed on her role, her presence, or her behavior beyond basic courtesy. She read it twice. Then she sent it. The reply came an hour later. Agreeable, slightly surprised, still polite. She exhaled, long and slow. Ethan noticed. You did it. Yes, she said. I asked for what I needed. And and the world did not end. He smiled just barely. That night, Clara lay awake, not with anxiety, but with awareness. Healing was not a straight line. It was a series of small negotiations with fear. She thought about Ethan, about how his protection had never taken the form of control, how his presence felt like a steady edge rather than a closing wall. She realized then that his silence was not absence. It was restraint. The next morning, Ethan found her reading on the couch, sunlight warming the room. About the event, he said carefully, "If you decide not to go at all, that is fine." "I know. If you decide to go," he continued, "I will be there only if you want me to be." She looked up at him. "What if I want to go alone? Then I will support that." The answer came without hesitation. Clara felt something settle inside her. Trust was not built by grand gestures. It was built by consistency, by the absence of pressure when pressure was expected. As the days moved forward, the contract remained. The obligations hovered, but Clara was no longer shrinking around them. She was shaping them. And Ethan, for his part, remained steady. Not as a protector stepping in front, but as a presence standing beside her, ready to follow her lead. Healing, she understood now, was not the removal of difficulty. It was the confidence that she could meet it without losing herself. And that realization marked a quiet turning point neither of them needed to name aloud. The evening arrived without ceremony. No dramatic build-up. No warning signs. Just a car pulling to the curb beneath soft winter lights, and Clara stepping out into a space that once would have swallowed her whole. She paused, not from fear, from choice. Ethan noticed the pause, but did not interrupt it. He remained a half-step behind her, close enough to be present, far enough to let her lead. Inside, the room carried the quiet weight of expectation. Polished smiles, controlled voices, people who believed they understood the rules of proximity and power. Clara felt it immediately, the subtle shift in attention, the quiet calculations. She breathed once, then again. Her shoulders remained relaxed. Someone greeted Ethan first, as expected. A brief exchange, polite, efficient. Then the gaze turned to Clara. Not curious, assessing. She met it calmly. There was a moment when an older woman leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "You must find all of this overwhelming." It was said kindly, almost. Clara smiled. "No," she replied. "I find it clear." The woman blinked, surprised. Ethan watched without moving. Another voice joined. A comment about how well Clara handled herself. About how fortunate she was. Clara nodded. "I am fortunate," she said, "because I'm allowed to be exactly where I am." The words landed softly, but they landed. Ethan felt it then. The shift. Not confrontation. Not dominance. Presence. As the evening unfolded, Clara chose where to stand. When to speak. When to step away. She did not cling to Ethan. She did not avoid him either. She existed beside him. At one point, someone suggested a photo. Clara hesitated. Ethan noticed and spoke quietly. "You do not have to." She considered, then shook her head. "I want to," she said. "Just not right now." And that was enough. Later, when the room grew louder, Clara stepped onto a balcony alone. The night air was cool, grounding. She rested her hands on the railing, feeling steady. Ethan joined her only after a moment, careful not to intrude. "You were remarkable," he said. She smiled, not at the praise, but at the recognition. "I was myself." "Yes." They stood together without speaking. Below them, the city continued, indifferent and alive. "I thought I would feel small again," Clara admitted. "But I did not, because you were not being measured." She nodded. "And because I knew I could leave." He did not respond immediately. Then quietly, "You can always leave." The words carried no conditions. No expectations. Only truth. When they returned inside, the tone had shifted. Not because Clara had asserted herself loudly, but because she had not bent. The contract had brought her into the room. Her boundaries had changed how the room received her. As they left later that night, Clara felt tired, but not depleted. In the car, she closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Ethan asked. "For trusting me to handle it." He considered that. "You did not need my trust. You already had your own." She opened her eyes, surprised. The car moved through quiet streets, the glow of the city fading behind them. Clara realized something important then. Healing was not about being protected from the world. It was about being able to stand in it without disappearing. And tonight, she had done exactly that. Ethan glanced at her, not with relief, but with respect. The kind that did not claim, only witnessed. The morning after felt quieter than expected. No aftermath. No tension lingering in the air. Just soft light filling the living room and the faint sound of the city waking up outside. Clara sat at the table with a cup of tea, her hand steady. She was tired, but it was a clean tiredness. The kind that came after standing fully in oneself. Ethan entered without rushing. He noticed the calm first, then her expression. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," she replied. They sat across from each other, the space between them uncharged. "I have been thinking," Clara continued, "about the contract." Ethan did not interrupt. "I know what it says," she said, "but what it does not say matters more to me now." He nodded slowly. "Go on. I want to redefine how we live inside it," she said. "Not legally. Personally." She held his gaze steady. "I do not want protection that feels like distance. And I do not want closeness that feels like obligation." Ethan absorbed her words carefully. "What does that look like to you?" he asked. "It looks like honesty," she said. "If something feels heavy, we name it. If something feels unsafe, we step back. No assumptions." He considered this. "And if something feels real?" She paused. "Not from fear, from respect for herself. Then we move slowly," she said. "Together or not all." The room felt still. Ethan felt the shift inside himself then. A recognition he had avoided naming. He had been careful, deliberately restrained. But restraint did not erase feeling. It clarified it. "I can agree to that," he said. "But I need to be clear about something too." She waited. "I do feel something," he said. "Not urgency, not entitlement, but care." The word was chosen with precision. "I'm not asking you to respond to it," he added. "I'm only naming it so it does not live in silence." Clara breathed in slowly. "Thank you for telling me," she said, "and for not asking for more." He smiled faintly. "That part is not difficult." Later that day, Clara went out alone. A walk through familiar streets. A reminder that her world was still hers. She stopped at a small bookstore, lingering among the shelves. She felt present, grounded. When she returned, Ethan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, preparing something simple. They shared dinner without ceremony. At one point, Clara laughed quietly. "This is not what I expected when I signed that contract." "Me neither," Ethan replied. "What did you expect?" "A solution," he said honestly. "Instead, I found a process." She nodded. "Healing feels like that." That evening, Clara stood in her room, looking at the copy of the contract resting in a drawer. She did not take it out. She did not need to. Its power over her had shifted, not because it had changed, but because she had. Ethan stood in the hallway, hearing her footsteps, aware of her presence without intruding. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future not defined by outcomes, but by alignment. He understood now that the greatest care he could offer was not certainty. It was patience. Clara joined him briefly, then paused at the doorway. "I'm glad we did not rush," she said. "So am I." She closed the door gently, not to shut him out, but to keep her space intact. Ethan remained where he was, calm. Healing, he realized, was not a moment of resolution. It was a sustained willingness to choose respect again and again. And whatever came next would be built on that choice. The decision did not arrive as a dramatic moment. It came quietly. Clara woke that morning with a sense of clarity that surprised her. Not certainty about the future, but certainty about herself. She moved through the apartment slowly, noticing how it no longer felt temporary. Not permanent either, simply present. When she joined Ethan in the living room, he was reading, glasses resting low on his nose. He looked up when he sensed her. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." There was no tension between them. No expectation waiting to be fulfilled. Clara sat across from him. She did not rush her words. "I've been thinking about what comes next," she said. Ethan closed the book gently. "I am listening." "The contract ends soon," she continued. "And I want to be clear about what my choice means. Whatever I choose. He nodded. Take all the time you need. She smiled faintly. I already did. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was respectful. I am not staying because of safety, Clara said. I am staying because I feel whole here. Because I am not asked to disappear. Or perform. Ethan felt his breath slow. I am also not leaving to prove independence, she added. I already have that. She met his eyes. I am choosing to stay. Not as a bride defined by a contract. Not as an obligation. But as myself. Ethan absorbed every word. And I am choosing you, she said, only if that choice remains mutual and free. He did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. Then I choose you under the same terms. Relief did not flood the room. Something deeper settled instead. Later that day, they sat together with the contract between them. Not as a threat. Not as leverage. The legal details had been handled weeks earlier. What remained now was only their choice. Clara placed her hand on it briefly. This served its purpose, she said, but it does not get to define what comes next. Ethan nodded. Then it ends here. They signed the final page without ceremony. No applause. No witnesses. Just two people closing a chapter with intention. That evening, they walked through the city together. No destination. Just movement. At one point, Clara stopped beneath a string of lights overhead. She turned to him. Thank you, she said. For what? Ethan asked. For letting me arrive at this without pressure. He smiled softly. You did all the arriving. She reached for his hand, not tentative, not urgent. Present. The city moved around them, unaware of the significance of the moment. Later, when they returned home, Clara stood at the window once more. But this time, she did not look out to escape. She looked out to observe. Ethan joined her, standing beside her rather than behind. They did not speak. They did not need to. Healing, Clara realized, was not about being rescued. It was about being seen, respected, and allowed to choose. Ethan understood something as well. Love did not require possession. It required patience. As the night deepened, the future remained unwritten. And for the first time, that uncertainty felt like peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because whatever came next would be chosen freely. Together.